Bueno.
All right.
What up, everybody? It is the South Star
Wow.
Classroom, episode 152, coming at you guys with the beard of knowledge, Mr. David Castillo. How you doing today, brother?
I am doing well. We started high school today, so my son had his first official day of
Ooh,
high school, which
ooh.
is pretty awesome. Yep. Um,
What high school did he wind up
and
going to?
uh,
We don't
Hold on
remember
one
the high
second.
school.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
he's
yeah, we
going
do.
he's going to anonymous high school with the rest of the high school musical gang, where they realized that starring in music theater for 4 years, these kids were unable to read.
I messed up the one of our banners there. We're good now. He's going to a comprehensive high school. It's about like 2,500 kids. It's called Valhalla High School out here in East County
Valhalla.
in San
Yeah, like
Diego. Valhalla, yeah,
is he
it's a
going to
big
have
school,
to
man.
perform acts of heroism to get into
Yeah,
Valhalla?
exactly. Yeah, not yet. But yeah, he started today, and got a schedule, and he's really excited. He's super amped because it's obviously like super new,
Hmm.
and it's just it's like when you were like you probably have less of that feeling when you're going into middle school because you're just so like you're just shook, but when you go into high
Yep.
school and you've been thinking about it and you're done with middle school and you're like, high school is like it's the big leagues, man. And so he's super excited about it.
And what was like, because like, dude, you get in middle school and it's like, oh shoot, like I don't have like a homeroom teacher anymore. Like I'm not in this kind of
Yeah.
like small, kind of contained area. I've got a locker. That's kind of exciting. I get to switch classes. That's kind of exciting. Then you realize like middle school is like terrible. Um, dude, there's like few people that I know who've had like a wonderful middle school experience. And like total overt, not humble brag, most of my former students. And that's literally why I built a middle school, because my middle school experience was so horrific and so terrible. Like my best friend,
Yep.
Richard Nassar, is like, those were like the two worst years of schooling in my life. That place was a jail. It was awful. But I was like, yeah, dude, that's why I built a middle school, because it was so bad. Um,
Yeah.
the high school experience is like exciting because you're like kind of getting out of like basic classes into more nuanced.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
big. Was that kind of why he was excited, or was he just like, yeah, man, I get to get away from the people that I didn't like at my middle school?
No, yeah, I think it's probably the former. Like he had hey, what's up, Bill? How you doing? Thank you, brother. He generally had a good middle school experience. There was some stuff that was going on, some malarkey, whatever.
Oh,
Um,
malarkey. Can't have any malarkey
yeah,
here.
yeah, but we worked through it. It was pretty uneventful, man. It was like 3 years in and out, and so I think with high school, yes, uh, we have in California, we have like pathways, right, where students can start to
Hmm.
take electives even as early as ninth grade along a particular kind of career pathway. And so I don't know if this class is part of a pathway, but one of what is his elective? He's taking like a digital design class, something like that, and so
That's
it's part of
cool.
his like ninth grade curriculum,
That
and
is
he's
actually kind of
super
fun.
excited
Yeah,
about it. Yeah, so we'll learn all about it today, but yeah, and it's a big school. They got a big football team. He's going to do.
that's fun.
He's going to go out for wrestling in the winter for winter sports. So all those things, man. It's pretty cool, and it's crazy because the school is literally like 10 minutes away. It's just so convenient. It's our local school. It's free. It's like
That's nice.
it's part of the reason why we moved down here. Big reason.
Was specifically for the schools or specifically to be in Valhalla?
For the schools, yeah. But we knew in this area the schools were pretty good, and so
Did you sacrifice a goat to get him into Valhalla?
we not yet. We might have to soon. My
Fair
wife
enough,
may
man.
have, but yeah, I'm not sure. So yeah, I mean that's what's going on. So it's exciting, and yeah, I mean we're going to get into this topic of like post-pandemic schools after our political roundup, and I have a lot to say on that from the from my seat as a parent. So, but we'll
Yes.
hold off. How are you doing, brother?
I love it. Oof. I always try to masquerade the stress and difficulties that I deal with on the show, because like, who wants to hear that, right? But I think in like a very human component of, we all deal with like crazy stress. There's always stuff going on behind the scenes. Yes, like I'm a very like happy-go-lucky, jovial person who seems extremely extroverted on this podcast, but I am human too. And I deal with the rigors and difficulties of stress. And this has been just kind of a funky and stressful week. But,
Yeah.
Overall, really good. Really happy to be here. And like, I'm excited because I will be in San Diego next week, ladies and gentlemen. And as a potential surprise, David and I we are working towards it, be in the same room hosting South Star Classroom together, like Voltron coming
Keep
together.
putting that out there. Okay,
and
we got to do it now.
Yeah, man, and finding each other in the universe and connecting and creating an energetic level of robot that will dominate evil. That is what is getting me through and getting me excited. We may, this is a big if, have a potential guest. Don't want to tell anybody what that is, just in case that doesn't come to fruition. They have a very exciting potential guest on the show next week. So all good, man. I mean, there will be a Chicago. There's got to be a Chicago when we all get together, and come together with the doc and with Jubilee. There's got to be. We did one show in live that was a lot of fun. Doc, David, and I, and like, there's always potential for not only those but some live shows down the line. We shall see. So, what do we got on the agenda today, ladies and gentlemen? We got three major things that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk a little bit about this here election, because like, man, again, I thought that this was going to be the most boring election on the face of the planet. And the twists, the M. Night Shyamalama ding dong twists have been coming a mile a minute. That, man, the news cycle is insane. And what we haven't talked about is an interesting look into our vice presidential candidates, both J.D. Vance, who apparently has a weird affinity and predilection for couches, maybe something that he fantasized about in his interesting book, Hillbilly Elegy, which I have read many excerpts from, and gotta tell you, there's a lot to be desired from a guy who will buy and sell his mother for his own career. And then I feel like if anyone watches wrestling, RKO out of nowhere, dude, where did Governor Waltz come from? Like that, dude. Tim Waltz came out of nowhere, dude. Like, I would have sworn it was Josh Shapiro.
Yeah.
I mean, Shapiro was between Waltz and Shapiro. I didn't even think about Governor Waltz coming into this, and slam. So hot takes from our audience and from David Castillo, Tim Waltz, man.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's definitely like the perfect example of what you would call the outside smoker. Meaning like in competitive swimming, you are put into your lane based on your qualifying times. The people coming into any particular, swim meet, including the Olympics, are placed in the center lanes, right? Because you have more of an advantage, because the water the water that you kick up will go out and won't come back at you, right? Because it's not hitting the side of the pool. And it's an advantage that you get. And so, but every now and again, you'll have somebody in lane 1 or lane 8, the outside lanes that nobody's paying attention to, that just all of a sudden smokes everybody, right? You're like, where do they come from? And that's exactly how I feel about Tim Waltz. And then learning, there's a lot to say about his, his story is almost like perfect, like Americana.
Yes.
Right? I'm waiting for something to drop. I don't think it's going to drop.
It's not gonna drop.
But I'm like, the dude was like raised in Nebraska in a small town, and worked on the
I was
family
born in a
farm,
small
and
town.
dude, at literally everything, and he probably, I think he probably travels and follows Bruce Springsteen on tour. I think he does actually.
I think Bruce Springsteen followed him.
Is going to, but yeah, this guy just has a great track record. I'm sure people. He's done time in the military, like almost 20 years or more in the what do you call it, the National Guard. Yep. He's an educator. He was a teacher. He taught what I taught. He taught civics and social studies and ninth grade geography. So a couple of things about his. So he actually comes from a family of teachers. I don't know if you heard that. Like his whole family is teachers. It's wild. They're all teachers. Parents are teachers. Sister's teacher. Brother's teacher. So they're like an educator family. So there's that. And it takes a certain kind of person to become and to remain a teacher.
Yes.
And if you're part of a family that does it, like you're good people, right? You're good people. And so, I really have trust and faith in that. But like looking at his track record when he was a teacher, he was also the football, like the defensive line football coach.
Yeah.
And helped to take their high school football team from a season of like 0 wins to like a state championship or a local championship or something, So took a team that was clearly struggling and, figured out how to motivate young people, help them to see what they didn't see in themselves. And he said, this is exactly what his students did to him, helped him to see what he couldn't see in himself. And they motivated him to run eventually for Congress. His students did. He also was, I can keep going on this. I mean, I'm on this dude. I'm on Team Walz.
You are, man. But dude, it's great because a lot of people don't know a lot about him.
Yeah. He also was so as you know, if you're a teacher, you're not just a teacher. You always do something else, right? You sponsor a club, you do this.
Always.
So he was a teacher. He was part of the football coaching staff. And he also was the staff coordinator sponsor for his high school's first LGBTQ student support group. Indeed. Right? I mean, so, you don't do those things for brownie points. You don't do it you do it because you have a good heart. And so I believe this dude has a good heart. I believe he's just a great person. He's great on the dais, like speaking. He's got good energy. I don't know. Like, where the hell did he come from?
I mean, like, I will say this, like, it's so funny to be like, where did he come from? And yet there's like, if you look and you're a political junkie, like David is, like Doc is, like, dude, Minnesota has come out with some like powerhouses, right? So starting with, at least in like my lifetime, Paul Wellstone, the famed senator from Minnesota, who was like the liberal before everybody else was liberal. Like he was the definition of liberal. Wellstone was talking about universal health care, universal pay, universal child care, legalization. Wellstone led the conversation on legalization.
Yeah. Yeah. And Walz also, when he was working at the state level in politics, he ushered through the state's first, school free lunch program, made school lunch free for all children. Like something basic, like children deserve to be well fed. Like that's what politicians should be doing, right? So he's got, his resume is deep. It's deep. So and I think he also there you go. He also, there are definitely things you can criticize him on, but you have to look at the entirety of the situation.
You're talking about Walz or Wellstone?
Walz. But I would say also about the ticket, right? It's a perfectly balanced ticket, right? Because you have a woman of color whether she chooses to be African American, Jamaican, or Indian on any particular day, as they say she does. From California,
the beach, boy.
right? Yeah, from California, and now you have this cornstalk guy from Nebraska in Minnesota, right? And so we talked about this on an earlier show. They've done the calculus. They're like, how can we move and get votes from the center? And if you're paying attention to any of the polling data, like they've made like incredible progress in a short number of weeks since this announcement.
Oh, I mean, the polling data, the amount of money that's come in is astronomical, right? So, just the quick take. I think I was surprised, but in retrospect, surprised, be like, okay, I'm not exactly certain who Tim Walz was. I did my homework, and I'm like, oh, okay, like this makes a ton of sense. But in retrospect, not that surprised. Like this is the state that brought us Paul Wellstone. This is the state that brought us Jesse the Mind Ventura, and I'm a professional wrestling fan, so I know Jesse as Jesse the Body Ventura. But like that was a fascinating 2-term governor that did some like pretty fantastic shit. Was like a very pro-union, very pro-working rights, very pro-labor kind of governor into Al Franken, which like the whole Al Franken thing. I know people are
that's
like,
a whole other. That's a whole other.
That's a whole can of worms. In terms
looking
of
at that in hindsight is like what happened to him was. I mean, he clearly did some stuff he shouldn't have done. But like considering you compare what he did to what's documented with our former President Trump, it's crazy.
Dude, it's like night and day. And of course, like I honestly, like, I don't think we can all easily say he shouldn't have done that. But what I can say, future speaking, is that, like, dude, if the Republicans don't give a rat's behind and they're championing a literal rapist who is flying on Jeffrey Epstein's
convicted
plane,
by a jury.
Yeah. So like Trump is a racist and a pedophile by evidence. And we're sitting here chastising Al Franken, and like the DNC has some reckoning. Like they need to come to terms with a guy like Al Franken because his work as a senator was absolutely exemplary. I've read every one of the guy's books. Minnesota, like you've got some insanely smart people coming out of Minnesota, man. My boy Carl out of Minnesota got to be one of the smartest people I know. So in terms of Governor Walz, man, universal child care, that's big. Like this guy is championing something and has done something that has not been done on a federal level. Universal child care, that is badass. The universal lunch and breakfast, affordable housing, legalizing weed. And meanwhile, JD Vance is a literal author of Project 2025. Like literal author, not, I don't know what Project 2025 is. He literally wrote sections of 2025 about dismantling the Department of Education, Commerce, getting rid of Section F, ensuring that we only have lackeys, which is what he is. He is a sellout and a lackey. And like, this is the world that we have, where you have people that have done the work to help people and done over people to get the work that they want. Ooh, you see what I did there? What's up?
Yes.
So, yeah, exactly, Bill. Thank you. Vance not only wrote the forward, he wrote several sections of the damn thing. I mean, hillbilly elegy, man, like sellout elegies is what they should title the book. So we've done that. And I think it's a good segue in that Governor Walz, vice presidential candidate Walz, was an educator, was someone who championed universal child care and accomplished it, universal health and accomplished it, who I think will come into the vice presidential role probably with a key eye on education. And that goes into our first article today, David.
Let me say two things about JD. Can I say two things about JD?
Yeah, hell yeah, man. This is our show. We can do whatever we want.
So this guy is the vice presidential candidate for the Trump ticket. you know, he's made multiple times. He has this weird thing about what's this thing about like people that don't have kids, the childless, like cat ladies,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. He calls them
Um,
childless cat ladies. Yeah. Well, by the
yeah,
way, where like the singles population of the United States has exploded. Over 40% of US
yeah,
citizens are single, not including kids, by the way,
yeah. And it's such a
but
weird,
including me.
it's a strange. I mean, that's how he
I'm
connects,
not married.
you know, with this like Christian kind of like culture war thing. His wife had to come out and save him. And she said, my husband only meant to insult people who actively choose not to have kids, not people who are trying to, not people who are trying, you know. And then this other thing where you have, you know, this guy, Nick Fuentes, um, goes after JD Vance's wife because apparently she's Indian too, right?
Mm,
And he won't even address it. Like when you have these guys that will not even defend their own wives, like Ted Cruz.
yes.
Remember Trump went after Ted
Yes.
Cruz's wife?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's got the face of a dog. She's got the face of a dog. You've got a dog wife.
She's a dog. She's got the face of a dog. I've seen it.
and,
I know the
and,
best dogs in the world, and she's got the face of a dog.
and Trump wouldn't. I mean, and what's his name? Cruz wouldn't defend his wife. Like if these guys are not going to defend like their, you know, legal or not even legal like partners, the people that are closest to them, they have zero like morality, right? And that's dangerous. These people are just straight up like tools, you know.
Right.
It,
And
it,
I,
it just
I
doesn't
couldn't
make
agree more. And just a
no.
quick interjection, because I know you've got something else to say. Look, The American President may be one of my favorite movies. And while it is, in fact, a direct reflection of the Clinton White House, as
Yeah.
was The West Wing, the line in that movie I thought was so prominent where, you know, Michael Douglas says, like, you are attacking my character. And I got to tell you, this job is all about character, and you have
Yes.
none. And like the moral compass of a president and a vice president and the character, it's just like any organization. The leadership of any organization is going to directly reflect the ethics and the moral compass of the leaders at the top. And I could tell you 1,000 organizations with horrific leaders, and of course those organizations are doing ridiculously nefarious things. But then those organizations that are led by very ethical, very moral, very straightforward people, I could think of my boy Carl in Minnesota, and I'm like, yeah, his organization is all about good work, treating people right, ethics, big picture
Yep.
learning, dude. Those people, they have a way of talking that makes you feel like you're walking on a ray of sunshine. And I could just tell you their leadership is exceptional because they have such good ethics, such good morals. And like, you're going to put someone like Trump and JD Vance. I'm like, yeah, dude. Like, this is how the Warriors come out and play and start mugging childless ladies on the streets because they ain't having children. Ooh, even though we got 8 billion people on the planet.
Yeah.
So I got to tell you that, like, my little tangent is morality matters, ethics matter, and you should want the highest level of that in your leaders. And I don't know, like, kind of, it's like, what does it say about you that you are so either sad or jaded that you're willing to elect people who have none?
Yeah.
And that's the kind of leadership that you wish to have, not just for us, but as our representation around the globe. I'm like, Trump was an embarrassment around the globe. George W. Bush was an embarrassment around the globe, is an embarrassment. Like, I remember when all the world leaders are like, thank God for Barack Obama. Like, this guy actually understands sentences.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
I'm
my
with you
goodness.
on that, man.
Yeah. All right.
And I
Let's
think
get into
did
it.
you have another point, or did you
No,
want
we
to
can
move
move.
on?
We can move on. That's okay.
All right, man. Well, you did have
Yeah.
another point. I didn't want to
No.
streamline
It's
that.
all good. It's all good. Yeah.
All right, brother. Well,
Let's
we
get
have
into
got
it. Yeah.
so we have talked about this before, but there was a really interesting article that came out on ABC News recently, really about the post-pandemic world of education. And the crux of the article is stuff that we've talked about, but it was really interesting to hear the take of certain educational leaders in this country about the nuts and bolts of what this is going to take. So in short, what is this article talking about? So the Pew Research Center found that about half of Americans, that's 50%, that is a lot of people, think that public education is going completely in the wrong direction. And then 82% of the people that Pew surveyed said that this has really been trending since the pandemic hit, that we really have needed a restructuring, that the pandemic was kind of this epiphany moment, this awakening moment to realize, oh my God, like we haven't put enough attention into public education, and forget about little silver bullets or little tinkerings or little ways of shifting stuff. What they're saying is this needs a complete and utter overhaul from elementary and especially into high school. We are seeing that kids are not showing up to school, that absenteeism is at its highest ever. And even the education secretary, Miguel Cardona, was quoted in saying, like, the whole restructuring, people are missing the point entirely. Like, what we need is both the kind of social emotional, and I know that word gets thrown around a lot, but I like to talk about like the soft skills, the ability to be resilient, the ability to collaborate, the ability to, I don't know, be social and not be stuck on your phone and know how to have a conversation. These aren't like loosey goosey things that make you feel warm and soft. We're talking about real human skills that matter in the real world and the workplace, combined with highly technical skills, particularly in high school, that are career oriented. Like, this is really what the Secretary of Education was saying. And the article gets into the fact that, like, dude, we haven't done jack shit. Like, it's that scene from Spaceballs. You guys find anything yet? Not a thing, sir. What about you guys? No, sir. You guys find anything, man? We ain't found shit. So that is, dude, Doc would kill me for my hot takes today. That's my hot take, and I'm sticking through it. We ain't done shit. And I can tell you that, like, David, Doc, Jubilee, and I have been talking and practicing these reforms for years. But I think this is a tipping point, if you will. Good old Malcolm Gladwell, to say that the American people are now not only concerned, I would arguably say are getting into like all out outrage to be like, what are we doing to change this? So, David, hot takes, man, on this article, on the state of education, and what people were saying needs to be completely redone.
Ooh, yeah. So let's see. I took some notes here. Let's see if we can pull them up. Let's see. Where are we at here? Oops. There we go. I think a couple of things. There's a couple of different things at play. The article talks about it definitely brings the issue up of social emotional learning, and I think that's different than it's connected to, but like you said, it's different than what we say is like mental health support. But I do feel like given the whatever, for some people it was like 1, for some it was 2, for some young people it was like I don't know, 2.5 years out of school, right?
Yeah.
Kids that are in high school now, or that are getting close to graduating, like they essentially missed all of their middle school, right? And so you have these big blocks of time where very important, not just academic, but like social emotional development was not able to happen in the best setting, meaning young people were isolated. Screen time was off of the chart, which we know, right? And so now we are, we're in the process of doing some kind of catch up or reestablishing a baseline. And it's actually, the academic work, now that you think of it, might actually be even more like straightforward in terms of like, getting kids caught up, but it's hard because we don't have ways of measuring like social emotional learning for young people, like we do for like math achievement or English or reading, right?
Right.
So I think the question of whether schools need to rethink how they operate and rethink what schooling actually is a no-brainer. Now, how that happens can look a number of different ways, and I think we're kind of coming out of this the challenge now, Omar, and you're experiencing this, and so many other people are, is all of those like federal dollars that schools were getting during the pandemic and post-pandemic
Yeah.
are essentially drying up, right?
Yeah.
And so you're in this like situation of like, yeah, we have to rethink how we conduct business, how we run our schools, how we support our students, yet you have fewer dollars, or your dollars are kind of like flatlining. So you're like, well, now how do we do it? Right.
It's funny you mentioned that. I was literally saying this yesterday to a good friend and a colleague of mine that I used to work with when I was a high school teacher. Is that he kind of kept coming up with these conventional solutions. Well, are you going to do this? Are you going to do this? Are you going to do this? And I was like, bro, how has that worked for you thus far? The more you keep coming up with conventional solutions for an unconventional problem is a perfect metaphor for what is wrong with education, in that people keep coming at the reform of education with very broke ass, uninspired, unoriginal tweaks to conventional systems instead of completely reevaluating the system altogether. This is an unconventional problem and therefore needs very unconventional solutions. So the moral of that is that, like, yeah, dude, as you dry up with money, it's because people keep paying for the usual things. And then people keep saying, let's throw more money at it. We need unconventional solutions. Like, the first thing I'd always say is like, look, dude, these central offices are extremely bloated. And it's like there's way too many people earning way too much money. And you should start decentralizing that and putting more expertise on the campus and trying to figure out a way of paying teachers a lot more money. I mean, I wrote part of my like master's thesis, I think the first time out, I don't know, I get confused, was basically like, dude, teacher pay is horrible. And as money dries up and people are like, where are we going to pay these teachers more? I'm like, dude, well, like, why do you have 1,000 people at central office? Because you keep choosing to do things in a very conventional way. But if you're not going to change the conventionality of your leadership, how are you going to expect to change how you're running schools? And I think that like, for better or for worse, you know this, David, like as charter guys, dude, we are always completely linked to the budget. It is something that I think we worry about on a daily, and we have to figure out how to make miracles with like $3, and we do. And I think the article was pointing one of those things out, is that as we look at the post-pandemic work, and you have a teacher shortage, you have people who don't want to teach, you have kids that don't want to be in school. I mean, there's an obvious calling for, we should be looking at ways to put money into not only teachers, but social workers and counselors, because those are areas of development and support that are going to hit the student at its core, versus let's spend millions of dollars on like X, Y, and Z, like safety protocols, which yes, we need, but like the greatest safety protocol that you could ever have in a school is developing strong relationships with kids so that they are seen, heard, and loved. That is the best way to ensure safety at your school, right? And I think this COVID article is like, dude, we said we were going to do this, but we're not doing it. So it just like, it's again the conventional solutions to very unconventional problems. It mentioned a
Yep.
bunch of other stuff, man, like high school and the economics. What did you think about those parts?
Yeah. So this is interesting because this is getting to Bill's um, point here, which we know, right? We know about so young people, children that are now probably in what, fourth, fifth, sixth grade, missed
Hmm.
out on like early elementary years in a structured school setting, right? Now we're talking about students in your organization, right? And that means they missed out on very key um, opportunities to develop some like foundational skills. We talk about literacy, the importance of reading, the importance of basic like math fundamentals. And so my brain is always thinking about like the other end of the spectrum about like high school kids. But we have it's a it's a multifaceted issue, right? You have the issues that are impacting elementary, you have issues impacting middle school, and you have issues impacting high school, all very differently,
Hmm.
but really kind of based on you know um, what happened during the pandemic, right? So getting to your point is, I think one basic thing, and it's interesting because my son's school doesn't have this, and I don't know why they don't have it. And we knew they didn't have it, but thinking about how to connect young people with school in smaller group settings,
Yeah.
um, streamlining communication with the home, like
Mm.
the power of the advisory system. So
Yes.
the advisory system
Yes.
is
Yes.
a it's not a class, it is a program, it is a system that kind of breaks down the size of a school into a much smaller unit. And so if
Mm.
I'm going into they're found less in the elementaries because they tend to sometimes loop with teachers, but like
Right.
in middle and high schools where students go from like one classroom a day to like six a day. The advisory is kind of like the anchor classroom where a lot of the social emotional learning can happen, where a lot of the kind of age, grade level appropriate activities can happen, community building, right? It's a way of building community um, in a smaller group unit over time. So, in a perfect setting, you stay with your advisor and the other students in your advisory in a middle school for 3 years. And in high school, you stay with them for 4 years. So you're
Hmm.
making these like smaller, creating these like smaller learning communities within a bigger setting, obviously. Um, that research is out there. Those models are out there. And I think for schools to come back post pandemic, knowing that we have not a truancy issue, but an attendance issue, right? Students aren't showing up. Attendance is an issue. Struggling to engage with communities. Like advisory is something that school systems should be like diving into, right? I think that's one thing. I think also, and I'm talking again here about mainly the high school level, Omar, is what the article talked about. And it's like offering, getting young people that are in a high school setting earlier exposure to the real world,
Right.
right? And that can be through um, dual enrollment in community college classes,
Yep.
whether they happen at the high school or at the college campus, but like letting students put one foot in that world of a 101 level college course while they're in high school with the support of an advisor and their teachers. Also, allowing students to kind of learn outside of the basic,
Yes. Yes.
social science, English,
Yes.
math, science kind of world, and expanding electives, and even going as far as to, like I say, in California, developing pathways where, you know, if I want to experience what it might look like to go into the medical field or education or technology or photography or art, I can actually take a sequence of classes while I'm in high school to get that deeper level of exposure. Doesn't mean I'm going to do that after high school, but it means I get earlier exposure to it. Those are a couple of things that came out in the article. And I do see those things happening. I mean, like the linked learning kind of career pathways, that's happening. It's offered at my son's school. Concurrent enrollment is something that's happening. But those are all kind of focused on the academic side of the house. What I'm not seeing enough of is like the social emotional kind of learning connection through advisory programs.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I always tout big picture learning as this incredible place that really has kind of nailed this process. And I think that their schools and their structures have nailed the advisory system and the social emotional learning component into the internship component. So they do something called, it starts with like learning through interests. My mom talked about this. So like my mom, when she ran Upward Bound, what she would do for every single kid was do a comprehensive analysis. And they used to do this in schools, and it's actually a really good idea. They take like a really fun quiz, and the quiz basically spits out what the child's acumen is. Like, what are you really good at? And it's not just as basic as like English and math. It's like you're really good at like creative problem solving. You're actually really good at systems. You're really good at creative endeavors. And then what it does is spit out all these jobs, and then you take that list of jobs that these kids have probably never heard before, and then big picture learning does learning through interest. And it's like, learn about these, like investigate these, like what are these jobs, like are there any of them here in this city? Do you need a degree to have this job? Is it an apprenticeship job? Do you need a associate's degree? Do you need a bachelor's degree? Then that leads into like learning, leading to learn, where you actually go and like, I hate when you leave on a field trip and you don't do shit, you're just listening. It's like a waste of time. These field trips that big picture learning does, they set up a whole workshop where if you're going to go to a marketing firm, you're actually designing a marketing campaign. You're doing the work. So you get a real feel for what it is. You're not listening to it or being presented about it. You're experiencing it. And that I think is the crux of what we're not seeing, is the connection of the real world, giving students experiential learning to actually understand what the hell this is and give the kid an option to then follow through. That usually leads to shadowing. I'm interested in this, so I'm going to go shadow 3 to 4 of these places to see what the day-to-day is, to see if I like it. Then leads into an internship. The structure that they design it is ingenious. It starts with like learning through interests. What I would add to it that I haven't seen them do, but they may do in some schools, is what my mom did, which is that interest inventory. What are your God-given gifts? How does that God-given gift lead to certain professions? How do you then research those professions to understand a lot more about it? Because the crux of the article is like, dude, we could be doing stuff in high school that people are waiting to college to do. We could be training kids on real world working experience, internships, collaborative moments, how to work with one another. I mean, all these articles, David, that we're reading are like, these college kids can't even talk to people. They show up to work late. They fucking can't talk to people. They're all awkward and shit. And these are the college grads. And I'm like, dude, we could be doing this in high school and getting college credit for these kids and having these internships. And I've seen some of these big picture learning kids, and I've spoken with them. Dude, I'm like, I'm speaking to you like an adult, and I have spoken with droves of college graduates who don't even have a remote idea about how to handle a conversation. Yes, Met West in Oakland. And just a quick aside.
These are big picture schools.
Exactly. That is a big picture school, Bill. How does your school deal with kids who have special needs? Do you put
that's a great question. That's a great question. Yeah.
I'm happy to tackle that really quick, David. Back me up. There are funds associated. As David knows, they're oftentimes a fraction of what we actually need to provide the resources for those students. But Alonzo, it depends on what that special need is. So, for example, a kid with dyslexia is qualified under what's called a 504. So that's not special education. That's you need a separate support. So then
Yep.
we have resources to teach kids with dyslexia how to handle their dyslexia, how to best read. We provide resources for their reading. Um, let's say speech impediment or in speech pathology, then we hire a speech pathology counselor to come in and provide counseling to provide that level of support.
Yeah.
If we're talking about special ed, bro, that is a very comprehensive process, Mr. Alonso. That gets into
It
what's
is.
called an ARD and an IEP. David, you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question, Alonso, because we're talking a lot about. So today, what we're talking about is like revisiting how schools should
Yes.
function in a post-pandemic world, and that means schools are going to shift the way that they operate, the kinds of programs they provide, the kinds of supports that they provide. So the question is like, what are those implications for students with unique and diverse learning needs? The goal should always be to determine what each child needs, each child that has an IEP.
What is an IEP, good sir?
An IEP is an individualized education plan. It's a document that lays out, the general conditions of a particular child, how they best learn, what their goals are, what kind of supports and accommodations that they need. So, I mean, and you ask me, I think every student should have an IEP, right? Because it's a highly personalized like profile. But the point here is like, if every child that has an IEP has a case manager. And so that's another level of support. So you're assigned to one, your child is assigned to one person that is able to kind of, be the point person for this particular child. And regardless of, what the IEP looks like, responding to Alonso's comment, the goal of the team, the special education team and the team of educators is to figure out how can David or how can Omar access linked learning, access these pathways, access social emotional learning, right? What do they need that's different? But the goal is always to figure out how they're able to access what every other child can access. And that's a very generic term, but that's or a way of explaining it. But that's where like the additional funding comes in, the additional supports. And yes, many times schools are not able to specialize in some of these areas. So they do bring in outside resources, contracting agencies, et cetera, et cetera. But great question. Appreciate that.
The only thing I would add, well, there's a lot I would add, but the main point that I would add that David brought up is that when you have a high school, let's just say Valhalla High, and you have 2,500 kids, how do you communicate to your teachers all of these needs? Because that is already difficult. Then it's teachers remembering which student requires what. Teachers will complain and be like, dude, it's hard for me to keep track of this. I got a class of 40 and I've got to do this and that. I got to tell you, this is where the advisory system and small learning communities matter. Because if you had a system where you have an advisory teacher and they know this kid, that advisory teacher then takes on the responsibility of working with all those other teachers, demonstrating to them, these are the small things that you need to do. Here's how to do this. Here's how to create this. It creates a level of accountability that oftentimes doesn't exist to make sure that the kid is getting service. And then, and again, the school of 2,500, who does this kid go to tell somebody that they're not being serviced? An assistant principal that doesn't know their name, a principal that doesn't know their name, the 8 teachers that they have who are like, look, kid, I'm just trying to survive every day. I think that the advisory teachers that catch on, like David said, every kid should have one of these. That is my belief. And many of our belief is like, if you had an advisory teacher, the same one for 4 years, imagine the relationship you'd have with this person. Trust you'd have with this person, the ability to share these things with this person. This is the kind of individualized attention that literally stops bullying, stops kids from feeling that no one cares about them, stops behavioral problems dead in their tracks. When a student knows that there is someone that cares about them and there's not this anonymity, like detentions fall, suspensions fall, attendance increases. Like these are the kinds of things that we've been talking about for years that I think this article is saying this is the kind of stuff that we should have in mainstream education. And when schools, and like I'll just say my own piece about this, as traditional schools who talk shit about charters, and charters like ours have been doing this thing for years. And hats off to the traditional schools who have also been doing these practices for years, because many big picture learning schools are traditional and they've been doing these practices. They're finally looking at us and being like, maybe we should be have been paying more attention. I'm like, yeah, you should have been paying a shitload more attention to what we were doing, because these are the kinds of practices that have been pervasively under the radar, changing and reforming education for the better. You've just refused to entail these practices either because you didn't want to pay for it, you didn't want to pay attention, or worse yet, you're fucking lazy and didn't actually want to implement and learn this shit, which by the way, like odds are that's it. Like people are lazy and don't want to do work. And I think therein lies the crux of this article. It's like it took half of America to come out and scream and say things need to change. And still, I don't think the change, David, is going to be as quick as we want it to be.
And one of Bill's earlier comments, and I went through this experience as a parent. That was how old was my son when we hit the pandemic? Like fourth grade, maybe.
Well, he's in high school right now. Yeah, it was like 2020, so about 4 years.
So he missed. So he missed like fourth and fifth grade in the physical school setting. But you know, I mean, let me see what Bill said here. He I don't know where he said it. I mean, we lost the comments.
I got the comments.
We got as parents, we got to see what was happening kind of under the hood, right? During the pandemic, because no longer was learning happening in a classroom, you know, miles away. You know, we were at home with our kids. You know, we were looking over their shoulder during Zoom. So we got to see the lessons. We got to kind of experience what the expectations were or lack thereof. And I think that, I don't think that woke a lot of parents up. That woke a lot of parents up, and it's pushed for this whole movement of like homeschooling. It's also pushed for this like latest wave of school choice, right? Away from public school systems. And that's a reality too. And if I'm running a big urban or a big public school system, you know, like if you are only able to survive if you are able to maintain enrollment. And you're not going to maintain enrollment if you keep doing pre-pandemic programming post-pandemic. You have to think differently. It's literally like survival as a system, right? And so the one other thing that the article pointed out, Omar, was like the depletion or the termination of the COVID monies to the schools. Now, we could probably argue, and it's different. Every state funds education at different rates. There is federal funding that goes out the door. That is more or less more like streamlined, and you can predict that. But I mean, the pure pupil, meaning like for if Omar shows up to a seat in a public school in like Brooklyn, they get something like, I don't know, like $30,000, right?
It's a lot.
But if you show up at a public school in Alabama, they might get like 15 or less, right? Probably, you know?
Well, I mean, like Texas is like, for like just the sake of conversation, Texas is like, dude, 5. Now, like, if you add on the federal money, if they're at risk in Title I, you know, you can get up to like 10, but like New Jersey is starting at like 16. You know, like New York is starting around like 18 to 20. Then you start tacking on, you know, federal monies. There's huge disparities in funding because it is state funded. So states that don't have a lot of money, like New Mexico, Mississippi, Alabama, very hard to pay their teachers well because they're so deeply underfunded. States like New York and California that are extremely well funded get a lot of money. And then states like Texas that have a ton of money have their governor hold that money hostage because they are really pissed off that their voucher bill did not pass the state legislature and
Yeah.
therefore held teachers and administrators and people like us hostage with a lack of funding. So yeah, dude. This is why we talk about
this
politics.
Circles back.
It's always intertwined.
This circles back to the beginning of our show when we were talking about, and we haven't dove in so deeply into like the educational like platforms, but you can pretty much rest assured like the Harris Waltz ticket is going to figure out how to fund education, and we can probably criticize it because there might not be a whole lot of accountability attached to it. But you can pretty much assume more money for education, right? A Trump Vance ticket is going to look to obliterate the Federal Department of Education and go full scorched earth, like school choice, right?
Yeah, and they're going to go full private school, just straight up private school.
Right. And so, as we're talking about the need to like revision and revisit, sorry about that, what public schools should look like post-pandemic, I'm gonna put my money on people that are going to believe in the current public school system, where I don't know, across the country it's somewhat upwards level, like 70 or 80% of kids are in public schools, something like that. That's where most kids attend school, right? In public school district systems, right? And I think that's where we have to make the investment. And these other people that want to totally gut it without giving it an opportunity to rethink or revision how they operate, it's crazy. Like I don't know what that world looks like if we totally gut public schools and we go full private, full voucher, full charter. Like I don't like the ending of that story.
Oh man,
it's not good for kids. Yeah,
I think it's anarchy.
Pretty much.
I will say that like there's this in between where public schools in this country need to start having waves of massive reform to actually do what Bill is screaming from the mountaintops to do, is teaching kids how to do your math and your reading, because those are neurological skill sets that grow the mind, and reading is like fundamental. This is what the lack of reading skills, in my opinion, is what caused the subprime mortgage situation. The lack of math skills, I could say basic math, it creates not only numeric problems, but like that's how Ponzi schemes work. Like you're not able to read the fine print and then understand the math of how it works to be like, I smell something wrong, right? So I think public schools need a major revamp of what they're doing. I think that in the charter world, a lot of us are doing that, but I will still say that like the charter world is not a monolith. For every wonderful charter, there's some like shitberg that's giving us all like a bad name and not doing it well. Mm-hmm. For every great traditional public school out there, there's a lot of shitbergs there. Like it's kind of like the restaurant industry, dude. Like you go to your favorite restaurants and they are amazing and that's the best damn burger, but there's 20 other joints that are giving burgers a bad name. Education's the same way. The difference is that with burgers, that's the private sector. That is Adam Smith. That is saying the market is going to solve that, where the good burgers are going to be eaten and the bad burgers, those businesses are going to go out of business. To do that with public education and privatize it to the point where you're allowing the market to dictate what happens in education, what then becomes the standard? Mm-hmm. What's good, what's bad? Well, this school allows parents to do whatever the hell they want and teach and treat the kids well, but these kids can't read. These kids can't perform a math test. These kids can't critically think. But boy, oh boy, the parents are flocking to it. A private Solution. This is the basics of microeconomics. This is why I always snap at people who don't know shit about micro and macroeconomics and make these sweeping, uneducated, illiterate ass comments that I'm just like, dude, fucking read a book. This is a microeconomic discussion in terms of like the free market ain't going to solve education, because it's about having clear standards that need enforcement and regulation. You're like, well, regulation is the problem. I'm like, bro, regulation. Teddy Roosevelt created the idea of regulation to make sure people didn't drop dead when they ate an E. coli filled steak. Someone needs to be looking out to ensure that like immoral people and immoral actors are doing the right things. Jane Madison quoted clearly, if all men were angels, government would not be necessary. So yes, public education needs a revamp. No, private education and charter schools is not the panacea. It is not the solution. It is a holistic solution, but they must have regulations. They must have accountability. And I think the last quick point, Bill, you're absolutely right. This is what a lot of people don't know about. The Department of Education has very little power. Very, 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 very little power. What the Department of Ed has is a bully pulpit, or at least not the pulpit, but the soapbox, if you will. They have a platform to speak about education, and they can give large sums of money to specific projects and to specific initiatives, but they are in no way able to control anything. Education is still totally state run. States make all the decisions when it comes to education. The Department of Education is really there to try to ensure good initiatives are pushed forward and then fund those initiatives. You're right about that money being restrictive, but the thing about Department of Ed money, if well thought out, creates drives for new reforms and new initiatives that get schools who otherwise wouldn't think about creating these reforms to do them, because money becomes the incentive. And that, I think, there is a bit of power in the Department of Ed. We are over the hour, David. So
we are.
Use that as my final comment. Do you have any final comments?
Yeah, I mean, real quick, I think we've covered the topic pretty well today, but I think I like this comment here. It is a threat to democracy, and I'm not exactly sure what Bill was talking about, but I could assume it's either one
JD
of
Vance.
Yeah, right. I think
his propensity for couches is a threat to democracy.
I think both of these things can be a threat to democracy. I think continuing to fund large scale public education systems that continuously fail to deliver results for young people. So we have young people that are, not able to read, not able to do basic math, and that move into middle school and high school. You have high dropout rates, young people that are not going on with a clear vision for what college or career looks like. I think that's a threat to democracy for sure, because we know that it impacts young Black, young brown children more than others, low income children, special education children. That's a threat to our democracy. I think the flip side is also a threat to our democracy, which is the idea that abandoning public education and allowing the free market to do its thing is also an equal threat to our democracy. So I think both of them are. So on that note, we will end, as we always do, somewhere in the middle, here at the South Star Classroom. Thank you for joining us for, where are we at, episode 152.
152, brother.
Yep. And we will be back next week with an exciting show. Thank you all for joining us and for engaging in the comments. And we will see you soon.
Peace.